What if there is no real you? Imagine being assigned to investigate a dangerous suspect. You follow him. You listen to his conversations. You study his habits. You watch his every move. And then one day, you discover something horrifying. The person you've been investigating is you. This is the strange premise at the heart of A Scanner Darkly. At first glance, the film appears to be a science fiction story about addiction. A powerful drug known as Substance D is spreading across society, and undercover agent Bob Arctor is tasked with infiltrating a group of users. Simple enough. But beneath the story of drugs and surveillance lies a far more unsettling question. What exactly makes you, you? One of the most memorable elements of the film is the Scramble suit, a suit worn by undercover agents that constantly changes appearance. Faces, voices, ages, bodies, thousands of identities flashing every second. At first, it seems like a clever disguise, but the Scramble suit is really asking a philosophical question. If your face changes, you're still you. Most people agree on that. But what if your memories change? What if your beliefs change? What if your personality changes? At what point do you stop being yourself? The entire film revolves around that question. Arctor lives a double life. To his friends, he is Bob. To the police, he is Fred. As Substance D begins damaging his brain, the line between these identities starts to collapse. He becomes confused, forgetful, disoriented. Eventually, he finds himself in a situation so bizarre it feels impossible. A man watching surveillance footage of his own life, observing himself as if he were a stranger. And this is where the film becomes much more than a story about addiction. Because Bob is not simply losing control, he is losing the ability to understand who he is. Centuries before this film was written, philosopher John Locke proposed a surprisingly simple answer to the mystery of identity. According to Locke, you are the same person over time because of memory. Your memories connect your past self to your present self. They create continuity. They create identity. If memory disappears, identity disappears with it. From Locke's perspective, Bob's tragedy is obvious. As Substance D destroys his memory, it destroys the very thing that makes him Bob Arctor. The body survives, but the person slowly vanishes. By the end of the story, Locke might argue that Bob is gone. Not dead, but gone. At first, this explanation feels convincing. After all, when people describe themselves, they usually tell stories. Stories about childhood, relationships, successes, failures, dreams, and memories. Identity seems deeply connected to the narrative we tell about our lives. But there is a problem. A philosopher named David Hume believed Locke's theory didn't go far enough. In fact, he thought the entire idea of a permanent self was mistaken. Hume asked a simple question. When you look inside your own mind, what do you actually find? Thoughts, memories, emotions, sensations, desires, and fears. But do you ever find the self itself? Hume claimed he never could. He could find experiences, but he could never find the thing supposedly having those experiences. This led him to one of the most radical ideas in philosophy. Perhaps the self is not a thing. Perhaps it is a collection, a bundle of constantly changing perceptions. No permanent observer, no hidden essence, no unchanging you, just an ongoing stream of experiences. And suddenly, A Scanner Darkly looks completely different. Maybe Bob isn't losing a stable identity. Maybe he's discovering there never was one. Throughout the film, we assume a real Bob exists somewhere beneath the confusion, a true self waiting to be recovered. But Hume challenges that assumption. What if there is no true self underneath? What if identity is simply a story created by the mind? That's a useful illusion that helps organize experience. This idea becomes even more powerful when we look again at the Scramble suit. At first, it appears to hide identity, but maybe it reveals something deeper. Every second, the suit displays a different person, different faces, different ages, and different appearances. Hume might argue that this is exactly what human identity looks like. Not a single permanent self, but an ever-changing collection of experiences held together by a narrative. The Scramble suit is not concealing who we are, it is showing us who we are. And modern neuroscience offers an interesting perspective on this idea. The brain is not simply recording reality, it is constantly constructing models and narratives. When someone asks who you are, you don't point to an invisible essence, you tell a story. A story connecting thousands of memories into a single character, the character called me. In this sense, identity may not be something we possess, it may be something we continuously create. This is exactly what Substance D destroys. Not merely memory, but continuity, and the ability to maintain a coherent narrative. The ability to connect one moment of experience to the next. As that narrative collapses, Bob's sense of self collapses with it. Whether Locke is right or Hume is right, the result feels terrifying. Because both perspectives point toward the same uncomfortable truth. The self is far more fragile than we like to believe. By the end of the film, we are left with two competing possibilities. John Locke tells us, Bob lost his memories, therefore he lost himself. David Hume tells us, Bob lost the illusion of a permanent self because no such self ever existed. One interpretation is tragic, and the other is existentially terrifying. And perhaps the film's greatest achievement is that it never forces us to choose. Instead, it leaves us with a question that extends far beyond Bob Arctor, far beyond addiction and far beyond science fiction, a question about every human being who has ever wondered who they really are. If your memories changed, if your personality changed, if your beliefs changed, if every story you tell about yourself disappeared, what would remain? And if you cannot answer that question, how certain are you that you know who you are right now?